Hi everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. As you know, one of my favorite topics are love and relationship, and the body and the brain and the behavior. And recently I stumbled upon this book. Well, it's not true because I found the author and he kept bumping into me and the other way around when I was studying love and relationship online. And when I read this book, Safe to Love Again, I was crying because this book would sum up all my fascinations and interests about love, relationship, the brain, the behavior, and the body, and our childhood wounds, and our inner child. So I'm very grateful and blessed for having you here today, Dr. Gary Salyer, the author of the book, Safe to Love Again.
Thank you, Joulie. And it was a pleasure bumping into you online, and now we get to do this.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. So I'm just going to do a short presentation. So I've been allowed to call you Gary, and I'm grateful for that because it's very hard for me to say your last name as I'm Danish. But you're a master transformational relationship coach. You are a attachment theory expert, and I love the attachment styles and wisdom about that. You are the creator and the author of the book and concept Safe to Love Again. In your addition to your extensive background in NLP, you're also an avid student of psychology, marriage, and family relationships. Did I get it right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you. It really is an honor being with you.
Thank you. So I've got my own personal views about why so many people are single today, but what's your perspective on that? Because I know you're much more experienced with love and relationships than I am.
Well, I think there's kind of two. There's the long term and the short term, right? The long term is we had a generation, otherwise known as my own, that said, we are not going to do that 50 style stuff, obligation, sort of really truncated. And we blew everything up and said, we can create whatever we want. And what we did is we raised the expectations so high, but nobody told us how to get there. It's one thing to raise expectations. It's another one to not give you the manual. And so all that did was create a gap, and that gap came out as a 50% divorce rate. And I think we scared the wits out of our children.
The wits out of our what?
I think we scared the wits out of our children. A lot of the millennials and Generation Z, they're a little more wary. And that's why, for the most part, millennials are waiting another decade longer to marry. But, and the good news is the divorce rate is going down in their generation. And I think the other thing is this oniline thing. There's an epidemic of feeling unworthy out there. Yeah. You go out there and Facebook says, everybody's got a perfect life, right? And I know people that are friends saying they have a perfect life and a perfect relationship, and I know they're close to divorce, right? You go online and there is the whole idea that these long lists, and you realize and you read what somebody wants, you go, gosh, have I read Dostoevsky yet? I'm not sure. And do you do Pilates? No, I do yoga. Oh, I got to do yoga and Pilates, right? When you get all that down, people are choosing off this list, and none of us feel like we measure up to all these longer and longer lists. And then if you add in the anonymity and the ghosting, it's a perfect stew of disappointment and too many expectations and people who can run away easily. And suddenly we all feel like being single is a plague upon our house.
Yeah, you're so right. And what's sad is that the lowest self-esteem we have, without even knowing it, our list of demands are this big. She needs to look like this, behave like this, weigh this much. He cannot be Jewish, or she cannot be a spiritual person like myself. I cannot mention online that I'm spiritual because that would freak men out. So I'm already dumped on that background. So everyone is selling themselves online as the person they want to be and not the ones that they are in the moment. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, recently people have been complaining there's a growth of narcissists. A lot of women and men have complained that. Well, if you can only online for 15 years present your good side, but never your bad side, that's I mean, so about 5 years ago, I saw a research that was predicting a growth of narcissism because of the influence. And narcissists are horrible at understanding what makes a relationship, because I mean, I argued this in the book in chapter 2, right out of the gate, that building a list is a predictor of disappointment. It is not a predictor of compatibility. When people use lists, it actually works against. The predictor is the quality of the marital friendship. It really is these 4 feelings I talk about. And the less list we have, and the more we are just going in the moment. Somebody may not have half our list, but if they make us feel welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered, they're the ones, whether they're 6'5", and blonde and Danish, or, 5'9" and a little, whatever, it's the quality of the relationship. And so our picker, is set for the wrong set of criteria. For the most part. Yes, some values. Yes, there's some bottom line things, but much past 3 or 4 or 5, we don't need it. We just need to
say that again, Gary.
We don't need more than 3 or 4, maybe 5 really bottom line qualities that we need. The rest, it's a matter of what we can build in the relationship and what that person offers us. Go ahead.
Yeah, but also today, I heard someone say the other day, but I have love for my partner. Love has to be enough. And I was like, no, love is not enough, because you have to have chemistry. You have to be, there has to be this, you have to share hobbies and values, and you have to make sure that you're going in the same direction. So love is not enough.
Yes, and we'd have to figure out what she meant by love. But love there's a certain amount of chemistry that has to happen. I didn't address that in the book because it's more on attachment. That doesn't work, But what I'm arguing is, once you get past, are you physically attracted? There does have to be values element. And the core thing that should be guiding us is, are we in touch with our brain's natural GPS for love? Which is what I wrote about in the book. I had a client come to me that was always complaining that she had met the same sort of wrong person. That's my typical client. They keep picking the same Mr. Wrong. Ms. Wrong.
I can't relate to that.
Yes. It's like, where's the clone stamp from the universe? I want that thing. And then, and the first session she goes, oh, I found Mr. Lottery, and I go, oh, I've got to hear this, right? And she explains it. And, oh, the guy was 6'3". And he was a doctor. Oh my God, he's a doctor, right? So, as we did our work, about 6 weeks into working together, she comes in, she goes, yeah. And he did yoga. He did yoga too, right? Doctor, MD, yoga. And what it comes down to was, says, yeah, he does yoga. He's always checking out the other women. She went with a list. But how well did she feel worthy of being treated?
And welcomed with joy and worshipped and nourished.
It's no nourished, no cherished. So when we do our work and we give her back her brain these rights to feel welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered. These are your brain's 4 natural feelings that must feel to pick, choose, and create. I talk about that extensively in the book. Now, then she finds out, she goes back online, and there's 2 guys. There's another Mr. Jackpot, right? This time he's an attorney and he's 6'2", right? And I think he does Pilates, and oh my God, he knows the 5 love languages. And
she's in love with the list.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she's in love with. The
exactly. List. But there's this other guy. And he comes dressed, he's got a good job. He's got a good job, professional in IT. He's about 20 pounds overweight, He comes dressed in his Hawaiian shirt, right? But so, after about 3 weeks, she chooses him because she goes, he makes me feel like a queen. I feel so worthy and cherished
Wow.
by this
Those
love.
are the right words.
Exactly. That, but before, the thing was before, she had only had a right to feel unworthy. Before, based on stuff in previous relationships, she only had a right to feel uncherished. It's not an accident. She kept choosing Mr. Lottery based on a list that would give her the same old experience. She had no right to feel worthy, no right to feel cherished and protected. When we went back and did deep work that restored it, suddenly she begins to see that, oh, there's another replay, and here's the man. She's not
So,
using the list, but using how she feels loved.
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. But I know that our listeners don't get this because let's just take it from scratch. You have four feelings that needs to be met in order to have your brain wired for love, right?
Exactly.
Feeling welcome. We can take each one. Feeling
Okay.
welcomed with joy.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yes.
second one?
Welcome with joy it comes from the template. It's called, comes from the first few months of life.
Up from 0 to 2 months. I know, I
0
remember.
to 2 months. Wow, you've got it down, Joulie.
Yes.
Are you welcome with joy?
Yeah.
Oh, there's little Joulie. So glad you came in. The stork is,
The open arms.
open arms, and that translates into a right to exist, to really feel welcomed. Now, later on, as adults, that comes in. You wake up in the morning and you hear the words, "Good morning, gorgeous." Well, you come in at the end of a day and your sweetie says, "You look like you've had a hard day. Come over here and get a hug." That's welcome with joy, right?
And getting a hug, even though you're mad or sad or frustrated. And then comes the second need, which is from when you're 2 months old up until you're 6 months old. You can take that one.
Okay, that's when a baby learns. This template comes in as when mom is making attuned responses. Oh, we're when we don't let the baby cry too much. We make sure when the baby reaches out for their needs, they get it, and they get an attuned right. And sometimes, and we know that moms only get it wrong 70% of the time on the first shot. But when a baby learns, okay, give her time, she's going to figure out I want the binky and not the bottle, then they learn to have a right to reach out for their needs. That's called the feeling of worthy, and Nourish gives us that. Later on, that's an ability to ask for your needs and to expect you're going to be able to take it in, to reach out, to take, and to, so you're not always giving and giving and giving. If you were given unworthy, you tend to pick takers or people who are clueless.
Yeah,
yes.
like
So welcome, worthy and welcomed are the first two feelings that tell our brain we're loved.
Yes. When I was running many years ago, I was running and I work as a body therapist and body talk practitioner. So suddenly my shoulders, and I was a boxer, they locked, and I was like, what the fuck? So I went behind my eyes and I saw me reaching out for my mom, and she didn't grab me, she didn't welcome me, she didn't attend to my needs. And I was like, oh, so that shit is now up in my arms, and I had to release that neglect and that shame and all the emotions that came with it. So yeah, it's quite fascinating. Not only does it affect our brain, but also our muscles. I think it's fascinating.
Exactly. And, the funny thing was I had to take those sections out of the book to get it under 350.
You should
But
write a bit about the physical stuff.
Yeah, what happens is the brain says, I don't have a right to reach out. And the body says, well, we better protect you. And it literally tightens up your shoulders so that people with a missing right to have their needs met have it feels horrible. It feels stressful. It feels painful to reach out because your body is pulled back to make sure, right?
It's also fascinating sometimes to see a person who has this kind of shoulders like that, or also
Exactly.
with women who have a big bosom. They will make themselves smaller instead of being proud of how they look. And it's such a shame how we carry ourselves, and we're and that shoulders can be up here, but it's also fascinating. Once that we know what it's about, we can release them again and get the harmony back to our bodies.
Exactly. Yes. That concave is another example of the missing right to have your needs met. And it's because the lungs don't have the ability to expand and take in. Everything is contracted to make sure you don't reach out or take in. Nicely noticed. That's that's the original. In fact, all of these missing rights show up as certain forms of muscular incapacitation or structure. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. It's amazing. I love this topic. I could talk with you for hours. And then when from your 6 months up to 1 year old, then comes the next layer that makes your brain programmed and wired for love. So which is that one?
Now that's, then you're getting a right to cherish, to be cherished and protected. I call it a right to separate.
What do you mean by cherished, Gary?
Well, let me explain. Cherish, what comes online as a template for future experience. All these early experiences are telling them what to expect and what to create. These are templates. I call them rights. The next one is a right to separate and belong. So what comes online around 6 months is the baby gets mobility. And at this point, suddenly they've got enough cognitive machinery that's developed that they go, whoa, wait a minute. I thought me and mom were the same, or me and dad, but they're over there and I'm over here. What's up with that? And they realize their self.
And that they can self, even though mom or dad goes away, they know that the mom will come back or dad will come back.
Yes. So they want to go out and explore their world. They want to be a me, but they know they're a little vulnerable and they want to make sure there's a we. They belong as well. There's backup. A me and a we. Now, this is why toddlers can be crawling around a room, and the moment you leave for 3 seconds, they go, wah, right?
Yeah, and that's the nervous attachment style.
Yeah, well, it's not just nervous in this instance. It's that, I wouldn't say that. It's a natural response of babies who know they're intuitively they're vulnerable, but they know they need to have backup. Babies more so. It's a Goldilocks, right? To go and explore and come back to the home port in somebody's heart, to be a me and a we. And you get split. I get all right to separate, or sometimes when mommy is never given away or daddy is intrusive, then they get too much of a right to be a we. It's a Goldilocks zone. Yeah. Now where this comes in later is when couples are struggling with the we. I know this one's been, somewhere in one or both, this has been not achieved as a Goldilocks zone. You show me a couple that doesn't have a we, and I'll show you one or the other that does this. This is the ability to know that you can be up on the high wire act of your life and pursuing your dreams, but the other one is a safety net below you. You can go out and explore and come back to the home port in somebody's life. You get to be a we.
Even though you're arguing and saying bad stuff about another, yes, you will still connect and know that you are loved. Because if you were to criticize me earlier on, I would break off our friendship because I didn't feel worthy of the love. I've been through a lot of abuse, just like yourself. So we're going to share your story in a couple of minutes. Yeah. But let's take the fourth need, which is created from when you're 1 year up until you're 2 years old.
Okay, so once they get their wheels underneath them, right?
You're ready.
Right, and at 2, this comes in as often the terrible 2s. You know, although with my son, it was the terrible 3s. It's 2, once with increased mobility and they get to know, they're dealing with the real birth of a self. Okay, so there's 2 rights that come in at the same time. Both of them come from a feeling of empowered with choice. The first one is the right to create your own experience. The inward self is allowed to be good and bad, strong and weak, you know, kind and mean. Babies, young children can be all of that. And it's okay to grasp all aspects of our humanity and to create our own experience. We get to be the standard. You know, at first it shows up as I want to play with a, you know, if a little girl said I want to play with a truck and not the doll, we don't give them the whole thing. Oh no, you're supposed to be playing with Barbie. She gets the right to create her own experience, right? If a boy wants to play,
and be who she is.
yeah. And if a boy wants to play with a doll, you let him. You don't say, no, you're supposed to be working with trucks, son. You know, you don't do that. You let them be the standard. And then in a relationship, what you get is share. You have a right to share experience and influence, that you don't find some dominator. You're someone who shares influence. The other one is the external version of that. It's a right to assert. You have a right to have a voice and to speak your truth in a secure way, and a right to have your wins in life. And that's the more subtle aspect. It's, you know, that your will hasn't been thwarted you as a toddler, so you know it's okay to reach out for what I really want. I can have my wins. If you ever hear someone in a future relationship say, I'm working and working my tail off and it never goes anywhere, you know this right's been hit. They only have a right to struggle in endless effort with maximum effort and just almost no results. And then, so when you add those together at the last right, in the third year, 24 to 36, the brain gets worthy enough and it says, okay, did I feel welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered? And it sums it up. And it says, I have a right to love and be loved. I'm lovable. And if it doesn't find all four, it says, I don't have a full right to love and be loved.
So let's talk about what you will experience both individually and also as a couple when your brain is not wired for love. So I've got one question for you, Gary, because with all my clients throughout the years, every one of them has been afraid of talking about their spirituality to their men. They knew that their men would cut them off, find them weird, or ignore them. So that's one sign about that, what you just talked about, right? The right to assert your voice. That's one of the needs that hasn't been fulfilled, right?
Yes. Okay. I actually get that. When I was writing the book, if you know, the first 8 chapters, it's written to normal people, but it's based on a lot of neuroscience, right? Attachment theory. And I had a man that was a good friend who was an engineer, right? But my 9th chapter is on the soundtrack and the soul lesson. And I talk about higher self spirituality. And I had several male readers saying, what's all this stuff about spirituality? It just ruins the book after all this science, right?
Oh.
And I disagreed with them. Right?
Because you've integrated both your feminine and masculine qualities. Well done.
Thank you. And, you know, I mean, I could, you know, go left brain on and go, if you look at the phylogenetic order of evolution, it's going from A to B to C and comma. It stands to reason that there's more higher evolution above us, unless you think we're the be all and end all. And that's a little narcissistic to think we're the highest order of existence in a universe this vast. But that's the left brain. The other one is, you know, a lot of the great masters. Look at Einstein. Einstein was the greatest physicist, and yet he was constantly saying things that are spiritual, you know.
Yeah, and he used both brain hemisphere, and that made him so talented. He even donated his brain to his science friend who would, how do you say, dissect it to see how both hemisphere had almost grown together, because he used both hemispheres so well.
Well, what's really interesting is it was Einstein's right parietal lobe that does temporality was 50% bigger. That's what allowed him to pull together all of the facts and mathematics on the left side. Now, the right brain does emotions and the left brain does feelings. I mean, does logic and facts and dissection. I literally had a physicist come to one of my workshops, a retired physicist from Lawrence Livermore Labs, right? This was about 6 or 7 years ago, and he was bored with life. He was about 3 years, and he had created the nuclear bombs that the United States military arsenal has, right? He was an extremely good physicist. And about 2 hours into the workshop, here we are dealing with feelings, he raises his hand and says, I don't see why we have to have all this feeling stuff. Logic will solve everything. And of course, you could hear the women gasp. And I looked at the woman, he was over on this side, and I said, give me a couple minutes, you know. And I said, so you think that logic, dissection, facts are all you need to solve things? I said, so, and you use that extensively as a physicist, right? Logic like that. I said, you know, the funny thing about the right side, and you don't think we need the right brain that does all the feelings. I said, the feeling, but it also does big picture, it does context. And I told him, I said, did you know that Einstein's right parietal lobe from his right brain was what allowed him to pull together, being 50% bigger? I said, you know, the funny thing is in physics, you have something called theory, right? Where you pull together all these disparate facts. If you didn't have your right brain and its ability to do context and feelings, you would not have a single theory. You just have facts. Could you do physics without any theory? And he goes, I go, oh, so you've been using your right brain. I said, what you're arguing is that you can solve the world's problems with half a brain. How logical could that be? and he, you know, later became a client, you know, where we introduced him to the right brain. Now, you know, for me though, you know, when you look at the great people in love, there is a spiritual dimension. And if you can restore enough, most men though, they weren't given much of a right to exist, or, you know, and so they flee to their left brain. We were told to do that. And you can't do spirituality, you have to have it from here down over on your right side of your brain. So what I have noticed is if you can give them back more of that right to exist so they don't have to live up here, because people without a right to exist, they try to live above it all, either very logical.
And
yes.
You acknowledge them when they talk about their emotions, when they open up and are vulnerable, instead of women picking on them and making them wrong like their mom would do. So it's also about we women leaning back and helping men be who they also are, emotional, sensitive, aware, and yeah.
Exactly. The way you do it is if you can get, you know, there's a lot of times they have to be coaxed a little bit to get back. But if you gently give them back a right to create their own experience and not what culture told them, and a right to exist, it's amazing how many times they will begin to notice the spirituality with them. It's just been told, they've been told they didn't have a right to it.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing. And when I left the army, I was 28 and I was completely burned out, and I had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in a very, very severe degree. And
yes.
I'm very, very grateful for that gift, because when I had PTSD, I had to shift from always being in my, how do you say that in English? Sympathetic nervous system.
Yes. Sympathetic, yes.
Yeah, and I had to learn to be in its opposite nervous system. So when I got the PTSD and I had to recover from it, I could suddenly turn up from my the psychic gifts that I had from my childhood. I've always been a psychic person, and today I trust my intuition more than anything. And haven't I had PTSD, which forced me to shift over to using the other side of the brain, I wouldn't be such an excellent psychic that I am today. And we can't be both intuitive and stuck in the left brain hemisphere with all the logic and systems and control. And so I think we should all look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how much of my brain's capacity am I truly using? Am I in the left hemisphere, too masculine? Or am I over here, like many women are, too sensitive, too spiritual, thinking too much, totally caught up in their own emotions? It's such a fine balance. What do you think?
Well, I think what you have a right to integrate both sides of your brain. That's what love really does need an integrated brain. That's what all this work that I do with one-on-one is, integrating their brain. I'm integrating left and right, you know, because the fact of the matter is if all you're doing is left brain logic, you're going to be cold and misattuned and into your head, and you're going to miss content, boring.
Yeah.
If all your, but on the right brain, if it, you know, it can get overheated, so to speak. It can get, you know, especially if there's any anxious or avoidant attachment running, you know, where they're running from, or they're trying to lock it down. You know, the left brain can calm the right brain. By, they call it, you know, naming your feelings. The very fact name language is on the left side. You know, naming your feelings has a known neurological response. Oh yes, I'm feeling scared. Whew, okay, that's what it is. You know.
Yeah, that's why I teach my clients, say out loud what you're afraid of, and it will calm down your nervous system, because you get to realize what is going on in your own system. I'm afraid of being loved. I'm afraid of feeling free. And last year, exactly a year ago, a man said something, your love is overwhelming and it's scary. And I said, don't make me wrong because of all the love I had for you. Don't make me wrong.
Yes.
And he said, say it as it is. And he was like, what the fuck do you mean? I said, say it as it is. You're afraid of love, which is understandable. And he said it. I'm afraid of love. And then he calmed down once he said that sentence.
Yes. Yeah. In that way, he's probably avoidant, right? Yeah, you know, don't know him. And, you know, and at that point, you know, it sounds to me like this is, the love is uncomfortable for you. You know, what feels too much?
Mm.
You know, and then you can insert and then find out, and, you know, say it's, so does some part of it feel scary? You know, and you can just, for so many people, especially men, you know, we were told we're not supposed to need a woman, except sexually, of course, right? There's a, you know, there's always that great almost obligation put upon a man. And it takes a while for a man to, there's a lot about culture that drives us men to this place. I mean, the great therapist, Terry Real, made a statement. He says, you know, when you look at clients, there's not enough men with bad backgrounds to be able to figure out why so many of them show up avoidant. It's culture as well.
And many of we women have been avoidant as well. We might not be avoidant when it comes to a relationship. We might be it with our friends and family. I've been both. I've been avoidant and I've been anxious, and I even been ambivalent, and I've been, what do you call the fourth one when you've been deeply traumatized?
That's disorganized.
Yeah,
yes.
I was that too when I started my spiritual journey.
Yes.
And we can all recover from it, and that's fascinating.
It is. See, you know, I believe these rights I talk about, it takes, for anybody who wants to wonder why they keep picking the same one or why they keep having the same fight, is you don't have a right for a better experience. We are always having the experience we have the rights for. The way I tell people, and it's funny, you're actually in Denmark, I tell people, if I gave you a free cruise over in Norway or Denmark, right? And if you live in California, if you didn't have a passport, would you be able to go? No, because you don't have the rights. And it's what the brain has. These are God-given rights. You don't have to earn these six rights, these based on four feelings. If we can give a brain, go back and find the exact moment the brain said it's not safe to be welcomed, it's not safe to reach out and feel worthy, or to be a part of a we and feel cherished, and allow it to feel cherished and welcomed and empowered at a deep body, and, you know, right back here in the part of your brain, then our brain automatically picks better. It gives us more rights. We choose what we have the rights for, which is, I think, what the book is really about, reclaiming your natural rights, you know, in a relationship, because every right turns into a certain pattern that I discuss in the book. For instance, would it be okay to talk about one couple I work with? And they're in the book. They're in the book in chapter Cherished and Under Cherished and Protected. She was very anxious, and then he was avoidant. And they had worked with every guru in the world. I mean, the big ones that even spent $100,000 on. And they said, the thing they said, we thought just working on ourselves would give us a better marriage, but it didn't. Now, when you hear that, working on ourselves, all right, to separate them, they belong.
You say something that no one else mentions. The
What's
we.
that?
The
Yes.
we.
Mm-hmm. There was no we there.
No,
Exactly.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I believe it's about me, and another one would think it's about him, which is so selfish. It's about we.
It is. That's my favorite sections in the book, the rights of the we. You know, show me what I say on stage is show me a couple without a we, and I'll show you a war.
Yeah. So
You
thank you so much for mentioning that.
yes, you've got to have that we. So I knew immediately, and she goes, all I want is a we. And he goes, well, you know, what do you mean by a we? There's just two me's here. So, well, I mean, within the first 5 minutes, and then she breaks into tears. I knew where we were going. She grew up in a home where she was, you know, really with avoidant parents. They were always moving. They were never allowing her. And she wanted to belong so bad. She had all right to separate, no right to belong. Interestingly enough, he had the exact opposite.
Of course he does. The law of polarity.
Yeah, he had a right to separate, and that was split the opposite way. His mother was very, very intrusive, always parked 6 inches off his nose, no right to create experience, no right to separate and belong, no right to be. So he's always going on a retreat to get me and leaving her.
And he married his mom, who's constantly up in his face.
Exactly. They have dueling rights. So when he pulls away because she comes after him, and then he feels he's got to replay. They married what they had rights for. Okay, someone that would go away, someone that would pursue you too much. But, you know, what we found out was when we gave her back a right to truly belong, and for him, the big fear was, if I am in a we, I'll be disempowered, the same way his mother did. Notice this is a template learned at 2 for him. And when we did some deep work, including the spiritual work in chapter 9, remember I mentioned them again, right? And he realized, oh my God, my soul's lesson is I could be empowered from a we. Suddenly, he does a radical 180. And there was even a couple sessions later, a couple months later, they're working, and she says to me, do you think he's really changed? The next session, she says something that was mostly about the me, and he goes, I don't see a we there. And she looks at me, and I go, I said, you asked me if he's changed.
He suddenly matured and stepped up.
Exactly. And because he suddenly, we found out the exact moment that the brain took it off the menu. A brain never gets up in the morning and says, how can I screw with my master? It always takes the best deal available. And if you're listening to this, I want to say, this is not about making yourself wrong or saying, oh, I'm anxious or avoidant and I'm screwed. Your brain took the best deal available. I had one of those split rights to separate and belong to, and I talk about it in the book. I had a borderline mother. She was violent, more violent than I discussed in the book because it wouldn't serve in the readers. It was, you didn't want to be down in the kitchen when you were 4.
You didn't trust on your mom. You didn't know who my dad was borderline.
Yeah. You don't know where that paw's going to come out of nowhere and hit you. No. So being up in my room and reading and playing Spaceman by myself was the best deal available. But when now that's the template, being separate, being a me, not being a part of we. But when I get married and my first wife says, and I'm up there studying to get my doctorate, and I've even gotten my degrees in marriage and family and religion, right, and psychology, but I'm all up here because I wasn't given a right to exist either, right?
Yeah, because you shut up the right side of your hemisphere, the brain, to protect yourself. You made sure that you put all your traumas down below your hara chakra and hid it all down there. And you probably and I'm not going to talk about that. Sorry, you go on.
Okay. Well, I didn't get why she said, Gary, I feel lonely in this relationship.
No.
Because I didn't realize I wasn't creating we. It was, and looking back, I can see exactly why she felt lonely. You know, now once I did the work, then feeling part of who we feel is good. Once I knew I could be cherished, what was missing? I didn't feel cherished. I felt uncherished, right? So
And that was your normal state.
whatever the feeling is running. So we want to be, the secure love style is given 4 feelings: welcomed, worthy, cherished, and empowered. The problem happens is if you were given unwelcomed, unworthy, uncherished, or disempowered, the brain will use those feelings as its GPS, those as your way of choosing, creating, and picking, right?
Can I say that in a way that other people would relate to it?
Sure, go ahead.
I call it survival strategies, or we could call them coping mechanisms, or I call them compulsive behavior. I call them compensative behavior, where we make ourselves better. We think we have to be perfect. We think it's all about us. We make ourselves bigger or smaller than we are, and we settle. We swallow camels, as we would say in Denmark. We swallow compromise.
Yes.
We all these maneuvers to make sure that we keep ourselves stuck in that old shitty story that I'm not loved, I'm not wanted, I'm not welcomed, and etc.
Exactly. The story always comes from the feelings. You know, people used to say the bottom line was limiting beliefs, but beliefs come online at 3. These feelings come on before that. Every story is just a long-winded way. A personal story is a long-winded way to explain how we got the missing feelings, the secure feelings. You need to change the story, but you can't change those missing beliefs. Those beliefs are there to explain the missing feelings. You got to go in and do deeper work than that. Swap out those original feelings, and then people automatically. I've had so many clients that, you know, well, the one said, you know, you do the deep work and 4 or 5 days later, you're just thinking differently. If someone's doing compulsive behavior like you were described, it's because the brain learned that they had to repeat and rinse a certain feeling and a certain, to feel safe.
Just like a crying baby. So when I was a teenager, I would actually give my siblings and my cousins love relationship because I was born a psychic. So when I went into the army when I was 19 years old and my male colleagues were complaining about their wives, I would just intuitively say, she's not complaining about the toilet seat or the fact that you're coming home late or this or that. She's not complaining about things that aren't working. She's feeling horrible. She's in a state where she doesn't like herself. She's not content with who she is. And they were like, oh, now I get it. So I told them to not take it personal when she complained about a silly things as putting down the toilet seat, because it's never about the toilet seat. And that's
no, it's not. Yeah. You know, and one of the things you find out from couples research is when they're fighting over the small things that they're wondering, why are we fighting on this? It's usually because one or the other, somebody has not been able to pursue their dreams, voice their dreams. When their dreams, well, whether they want to get a degree or they want to have a better bowling or they want children, it comes out sideways as weird conflict, you know. And now dreams, that's all about empowered with choice.
Yeah. Yeah, so when a colleague would say, I can't get a motorcycle from my wife, I would say, well, it's not about the bike. It's, well, if you have a wife who's putting restrictions on you and you can't buy a bike, you're not with the right partner, I would be brave enough to say that.
Yeah, and it's more about what does that bike represent for her? Yeah, what feeling does it give her? And then, you know, she may like motorcycles, some people do, or it may represent freedom, you know. And somewhere along the line, this woman doesn't have a full right to create her own experience. Give her back that, and suddenly things calm down.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can we talk about the different attachment styles?
Yeah.
And can you also tell us how they show up in a relationship or in just our behavior in general?
Yeah. Well, there are 4 attachment styles. I talk about 3 because the 4th one is called disorganized. We mentioned that before. And tends to be people who were truly abused, and they tends to go more into cluster B, disorganized, personality disorders. So I leave them. That's more clinical, right? I wrote the book for the 95% of people that just have what I call normal middle class craziness.
All my clients have had it, and I've cured them for it by doing deep regression therapy and inner child work.
Yes. So there's three styles. We know from the time a baby is 1 to 1.5 years old that there's something called the strange situation. You take the baby, put them in a room, play with their mom, and when they separate, based on how they respond to the separation and the reunion, then you can tell what sort of style of love they have that will track for the rest of their life, barring intervention, right? Secure babies, they don't want mom to leave either, but when they come back, they calm down quickly. They're happy to see mom. It's like they knew she was coming back.
The nervous system can regulate itself.
Exactly. And they go out and resume playing. Now, some babies, though, are anxious. And the secure around age 20, are about 50% of the population. Now, the anxious, that baby has been given intermittent attuned responses. They're not there. They're not there. They're not there. And some part amped up. Yep. And they want to fight to lock it down. It's a fight response. And so they're angry. They're always worried. When does love go away? Why didn't you text me? Where were you last night? All that stuff. Right?
Jealousy also.
Yes. And they're angry when mom shows up, and they don't know whether, and it's funny, they're hugging and they're doing this at the same time they're hitting. They're angry. They don't, they want to lock it down. When does love go away? How dare you go away?
But can I ask you, that is stuck in their amygdala brain, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Mostly in the amygdala, but, to really say, but as we get to be adults, the whole brain's involved with this. There's, the prefrontal cortex starts making up really interesting stories. And the story can become to drive. There's times you have to deal with both limbic and prefrontal cortex. The story, we know from attachment that once the story is made as an adult, that story predicts with 85% accuracy the love style of your children. What you tell your children about your own childhood and your own about love and relationship becomes theirs, 85%. Yeah. The other one is the avoidance. The avoidance, they just didn't get a lot of it. They didn't get a lot of attuned response. They were often left on their own. They often look curiously mature and precocious for their age. They learn to walk and go, oh, look how mature they are. But they know that mom and dad just aren't there. So they have response.
We become too self-regulated.
Too self-regulated. The cortisol is still regulating, but they have learned that to downplay their emotions in order to regulate it. Exactly. Now, when these babies grow up, they are emotionally dismissive because that's how they had to down-regulate themselves. And they're the ones that become what I call the Marlboro mate. The Marlboro. Well, man, there's this old commercial. The Marlboro man sold cigarettes, and he was some cowboy dude that was always out on a rock or a ledger by himself. You never saw that guy with anybody else. He's the epitome of the Lone Ranger, right? And they don't create we's. They're often emotionally dismissive, and the worst fear is being dependent on or depending on somebody else.
Because so now, hurt again.
Yes, much like the man you described earlier, they said, "Oh, this is overwhelming," right? Mm-hmm. Real love feels too much. And the law of attraction is the anxious and the avoidance tend to attract each other. It's the law of attraction from hell. So these are these missing feelings and missing rights have a predictable response, either overamping the nervous system, the anxious, or underamping it, the avoidance. And then we're off to the races with patterns as couples. And that's what I do. I take these feelings and these rights and show how they make up love styles and how they show up as adults, as singles, and love patterns. And the thing is, you know, I went to a party some years ago in Marin, and there were about 40 people there, and half of them had read the book Attached. And almost all of them said the same thing, you know, finding out that they were avoidant or anxious. Yes, that was 10 years ago, released in 2008, about 12 years ago. And what they all said was the book made me feel, I got halfway through and I felt hopeless. It's like I had this big sign over my head that said, screwed, anxious or avoidant. As good as the book was, and it was groundbreaking for its day, it does not give a road back to security.
No, exactly. It just tells you what the problem is. And there I was again. And I'm not gonna lie, I have studied more than 50 amazing, gorgeous dating coaches out there. One would talk about feminine behavior, which helped me a lot when I had PTSD. One would talk about masculinity, men, women, behavior, and stuff like that. Someone would talk about attachment styles. Another one would talk about communication, what's feminine and masculine communication. No one gave me the techniques to bring my brain back into balance, and I'm still recovering with the help of your book. And that's made me cry when I read your book, because not only do you summon up all these things, because you've also studied many experts out there, but you also talk about my biggest strength, which is the physical embodiment. Many
Yes.
of us, probably yourself as well, had a mom who wasn't there. She was just up here. You would hear her, but you couldn't feel her. You didn't connect with her. And about 4 years ago, I created this gigantic 3 months online seminar called Heal from Your Childhood, or something like that.
Yes.
And I asked all these women, what do you want? And all of them said, I want to meet a man and feel connected with him. I want to meet a man who could be my best friend and I can connect with and share everything with and I feel so close with. And I was like, yeah, but gorgeous ladies, you're talking about yourself. The one you're seeking is yourself. You want to be emotionally intimate with yourself, embodied in your emotions and feel safe around yourself. And that's why I then built the seminar. But I kept on not having the final puzzle, the final piece in the puzzle, which was what you gave me. So thank you, Gary. I loved you and the book from the minute I started reading, because I knew you would sum it all up. The missing part was our brain.
Well, I had the same pilgrimage. I did all these years of therapy, and it just left me managing my pain.
Yeah.
And I wanted what some of my friends had, 30 and 40 years. Everybody deserves a lasting love. And so I said, if they can't crack the code, I will. And if you really think about it, all these things, masculine polarity and everything, your love style is online by the time you're one. And I said, so whatever tells a brain it's loved or not loved by one is the answer. Prefrontal cortex isn't on, so it ain't beliefs, can't be story. It's not polarity, because little babies that aren't doing, they're doing it naturally, but they're not doing polarity. The only thing online are feelings.
And behavior and dating techniques and communication styles, and none of it. I've spent more than $50,000 on seminars, and no one has given me what your book has given me. And I'm still not done yet, because I'm learning by doing and reading.
It is meant to be a unified field theory. It is meant to be a unified field theory.
Yeah.
And the other thing I did, I haven't told people, is every weekend for a year, I sat down and I wrote it the way I had to write it from my right brain, not my left brain.
Why?
I wrote it, I had to situate myself and write it the way my right brain would write it if it had language versus my left brain. It was a spiritual discipline. Well, I am so happy that, it was meant to give people a roadmap to fill in, to tie in, to go deeper than a lot of coaching that doesn't go deep enough, to be quite frank. There's a lot of love coaching that, yes, it's good and it's accurate up to a point, but it's not going to restore the problem.
It's up here, just it doesn't go. It doesn't go below. I can't wait for our next interview where we're going to talk about your background and what happened with you and your degrees and when you had a borderline mom who was drinking. I can't wait to hear more about that. But thank you so much for joining us here today and talking more about your book. And your website is also called safetoloveagain.com, right?
No, GarySalyer.com.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I own Safe to Love Again and Safe to Love Again book.
Yes, you do. Because
of course I do, but I haven't really accented that. I don't know what it's got going on there. But I know Gary Salyer, SAOY.com. You can reach out to me if you have other questions. You know, the book's on Amazon. And thank you. It's Joulie, it's been a beautiful experience with you today. And I just applaud the work you're doing for love there. And
likewise. Now I found someone who I can look up to, and yeah. So thank you for your great work and for your time here today. And I can't wait for our next interview. So thank you all for joining us here today, Gary.
Thank you, and everybody who's listening. Thank you very much.